It is overtime here again at Old Favorite Friday, and as many times I'm joined by Ralph Renault, head brewer here at Barrel of Monks Brewing, and I am Kevin Abbott. I'm one of the owners of Barrel of Monks Brewing, and we are talking about Brooklyn Summer Ale, and this is a pale ale from Brooklyn Brewing. This is a brewery that I really love. We don't get as much stuff as we used to from Brooklyn, and there's also some beers that I absolutely love, like Sorachi Ace, or Sorachi Ace, which way? How do you know how to pronounce that one?
I was here, Sorachi Ace.
There we go. That was one of my favorite beers of all time. I don't believe they make it anymore, unfortunately. But there's some great beer from Brooklyn, and this is a beer that came up at Total Wine, and I love this beer. I love a straightforward pale ale and a classic style pale ale. We were tasting this before we went on the camera, and that was, I think, the first thing you said about it, right?
Yeah.
It was about classic pale ale style.
Yeah, it's definitely got a very classic hop profile. Almost to the point where, as I was talking to Kevin or talking to you, I wanted to try and figure out what hop it was because I don't know exactly what it is, but it's something I've definitely had in the past, probably even from Brooklyn. But the one thing I noticed the most is it is very floral, which is really nice because playing off that it's supposed to be a summer ale, I feel like it hits the nail on the head with that floral character. So I like the way they kind of did the profile for this beer overall.
Yeah, it's really nice. You know, one of the things that I definitely get a floral note there. There's some citrus. There's some classic kind of sea hop citrus here. It is 5% alcohol, really clean, really drinkable. I'm getting almost like a tea characteristic of it, to go along with the citrus, with the floral nature of it. Maybe that's the tea is the floral aspect. That's obviously very possible, but. It is really, really nice to have a clean, dry pale ale that is not trying to be a New England IPA, right? That's not trying. We talk about this all the time. Is the fact that if you make a pale ale too hoppy and too hop forward, you're just making an IPA, right? Because there are 5% IPAs, right?
Yeah.
So where is that tipping point for you?
For me, it would be not only the amounts, because like you said, when you use too much hops, no matter how big the beer is, it's too much. Literally, it winds up being green and herbaceous and not in a very pleasant way. But for me, it's like when you add the hops and how you go about it, because you have to know you're going to get certain characteristics from adding them at certain times, and even like, okay, now is when I should add more, now is when I should add less. And they seem to, because obviously they knew what they were going for. So if anything, there's definitely more, in layman's terms, I would say more like aroma addition, so probably later on at the end. And they probably, because you do get a slight bitterness, but nothing too jarring. So they probably sprinkled some throughout, but didn't go too heavy-handed at one point or the other, is what I imagine.
Yeah, I mean, the body of this beer is just perfect. It's, as I mentioned before, but very drinkable, very clean. You do have a nice, subtle, well-integrated bitterness, and you notice this with a lot of IPAs, especially on the bitter side of the spectrum. We don't see as many of them as we used to back in the day during the IBU wars, but you get this kind of jarring bitterness very often, and a well-integrated bitterness is like, it's not shocking. It kind of washes over your palate. It does what, aperitifs and drinks like that did classically, adding a flavor component of bitterness without bitterness being the main show. And for a long time, that's what we've gotten. For a long time, we had that, and now we have IPAs, pale ales. They want zero bitterness, right? So that's what we do in the U.S. when we make beers. We swing from one extreme to the other, right? If a little bit of bitterness is good, all the bitterness is good. If a little bitterness is bad, like all the bitterness is bad.
Yep.
Right, so it's an interesting concept. I like the pale ale style because of that, because it doesn't try to be too much in a lot of ways. That the balance and by utilizing hops to add flavor and aroma without being like the only thing you're trying to taste in the beer, you make a more complex and a more interesting beer.
Yeah, and the one thing I like about how they did this, because it is definitely, while it is super drinkable, I would say it's pretty malt forward beer. But what I like is the way they integrated kind of the bitterness and hops that we've been talking about. It makes it to me where I want to take another sip, where otherwise I feel like it could, if it was just so sweet, it could wind up being a little flabby. But because they have that little to like balance off of, so to speak, that little bit of hop character, that it does make you want to go back. Like that's kind of, for me, what makes it so crushable or so drinkable is because they managed to just find that like fine-tuned balance that it's like, oh, okay, this isn't just sweet, or this isn't, like you said, just bitter. I can go back and like want to have another one.
Yeah, I mean, and you can see on this, I mean, it's just got a beautiful color to it. I mean, you can tell, I mean, clear as bell, right? Gorgeous and colored, has malt flavor to it. That's another thing. Oftentimes you will see pale ales and IPAs, especially in that more bitter style, that they were devoid of malt character. And a little bit of everything. Everything in moderation is a good rule of thumb in when you're looking at beer and looking to build complexity and make a really, really well-rounded beer. And Brooklyn's a great brewery, and this summer ale is a great example of a pale ale. And I highly recommend that anyone watching this goes out and picks some up while it's available. Give a little love there. This is the Brooklyn Summer Pale Ale. Go pick this beer up. Obviously, it is a seasonal, so you're not going to get it very long. And also make sure, if you're seeing this video later on in the year or something like that, with beers like this, make sure you look at the dates. Right, because if you drink this beer 6 months after it's made, it's going to be a completely different experience, and that's one of the issues you see with a lot of like big box, like craft centric stores, is a lot of times will have older beer on the shelf. So just be careful about that. Make sure you get the beer and drink it the way it was intended. I was looking through some of the comments of this beer on Untappd and on Beer Advocate. And you could tell by reading some of the comments and how they were describing the beer that they were drinking year-old beer.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They were describing, classic oxidized flavors. They were talking about like caramel flavor and stuff in this, which is not here.
No.
But as the hops fade and as those malts oxidize, they'll give off those flavors. So sorry about that little tangent, but that's a big thing for me, especially when we're trying to have beer that's fresh, and we want everyone to drink beer that's fresh. And we want everybody to drink our beer at the peak freshness when we believe that the beer is ready to drink, and I know that Brooklyn and every other brewery does too. So pick this beer up, give it a shot, tell us what you're drinking for Old Favorite Friday, tell us what we should be drinking next week, poke around the channel, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and see all the other conversations we're having about other incredible classic beers from great breweries. And we'll see you next week. Cheers.